In this video, we're going to talk about how to overcome dopamine addiction. And it doesn't actually matter which of these habits, or maybe it's not even on this list, that you're trying to change, because the mechanism and the way that we actually do it is the same. So I struggled with multiple of these habits: eating junk food, struggling to stop playing video games, scrolling on social media, watching endless shows. And after I studied and understood psychology and how my brain works, I was able to change all of these habits. And so I've helped people with various other dopaminergic habits, and the way is always the same. And so if you've struggled to overcome any of these, if you feel like you're wasting time on things that you don't want to be doing, then this video is going to really help you out. So very quickly, dopamine is a neurotransmitter in our brain that has a lot to do with our motivation and ability to do things that are difficult, our pleasure and our reward. And so when we have a lot of dopamine, we feel good, we feel motivated. When we have low dopamine, don't feel motivated, we're lazy, we're engaging in addictive things. And so we normally have this amount of dopamine that's just constantly flowing in our brain. And historically, throughout the evolution of humans, we engaged mostly in tasks that required effort. And so that effort actually created more dopamine. So we don't have an infinite amount of dopamine, but we can create more. And when we engaged in tasks that were hard and that improved our lives, our brain would create and release more dopamine. And then it would return back to its normal level. And so that's all fine and good. That allowed us to be motivated to do difficult things that we needed to do. Now, on this side, we see sort of the dopamine of our modern world that's filled with various addictive things. And so these addictive things, they kind of trick our brain into thinking that they are good for us, and so therefore it releases dopamine. However, the issue is that they're so enjoyable, so stimulating, palatable, and they don't require effort, and so they don't create dopamine in that process. And so because of that, after getting that spike of dopamine, we get this crash while our brain needs time to restore and replenish that dopamine. And instead of giving it time to do that, to get back to that normal level, we engage in that activity again because we get that craving and we know it's going to feel good. Maybe we're coping with stress, and we keep doing that, causing further and further crashes because we're just consuming up all the dopamine until we're in this sort of dopamine deficit state where our brain chronically does not have as much dopamine as it did in the past. So the answer from this is quite simple. If we simply give our brain time to restore back to that normal state, then we'll be more motivated to do things that will improve our life, and we won't crave these spikes as much. However, that is very difficult. And so that's where all the different tools I'm going to go over come in. And most people, they try to do this sort of dopamine fast just through sheer willpower, and very quickly give up because it's very difficult when we're in this dopamine deficit state. We're feeling unmotivated, we're feeling anxious, we just want to have that peak again. And so you can think of just relying on willpower like trying to build a house with a hammer. Like, sure, you have one tool, but it's not going to be enough. Like if we want to build a house, we're going to need lots of different tools. We're going to need nails, we're going to need a screwdriver, we're going to need a hammer, we're going to need lots of different things to be able to build that house. And so that's what I'm going to talk about now, the 5 main tools that will help you as you're restoring that high baseline level of dopamine that's going to allow you to enjoy more difficult things. Alright, so the first and most important tool is replacement. I'm not talking about replacing that same dopamine spike or peak, but we can somewhat replace the satisfaction of the value or desire that led you to that peak or that spike. So, for example, one of the habits I had to overcome was video games, which the reason I wanted to play so much was because the values, it was satisfying for myself of progression, learning new skills, connecting to other people. And so because of that, combined with how entertaining and easy it was why it spiked my dopamine so much. And so if I could find a way to replace the learning new skills, progression, connecting to other people in a way that required effort and wasn't so stimulating, I could get a more reliable source of dopamine that wouldn't cause a crash. And so that's what we're seeing over here. So I used to have this low dopamine deficit state, and once I was fulfilling those values in a healthier way, you can see I started to make progress over time. And so this won't cause the same spike, but it will create some healthy dopamine for you in that it's not going to cause a crash. And so eventually you'll be able to get back up to that normal state again, and these things will feel even better. You'll be even more motivated to do things that are going to improve your life. So the things that I ended up doing was I became a missionary. I started learning skills about teaching about spirituality and the gospel, and then I started learning about psychology, about the brain, and then transitioning into my career, learning different skills around crisis line, phone calls, helping people in crisis situations, and these things fulfilled these values for me, and they give me a sort of reliable source of dopamine each day. And so you can think about, okay, why do I engage in my habit? Is it to cope with stress? Is it to connect with friends? Is it to learn some sort of skill? Once you ask yourself that, you can figure out, how do I fulfill that desire in a healthier way that's less stimulating and that requires more effort? And that's going to be a healthy form of dopamine for you. During this 2-week, 3-week, month period while you're getting back up, there's still this difference between where you're at and this peak, and that's going to be painful. That's going to cause cravings. You're going to want to get that easy dopamine, pull out your phone, scroll on social media, go eat the junk food, whatever. And that's why we need these other tools I'm going to go over in this video to help you while you're restoring that normal level. Right, so step 2, after you've made the proper replacement for your habits, this is the sort of low-hanging fruit. This is the easy stuff you can do instantly that's going to make a big difference in if you reach your goals and if you're able to stop engaging in these addictive habits. And so this has to do with our environment, both our physical and our social environment. And so physical, here's a few examples. If you're trying to stop eating different addictive junk food with sugars and other addictive things, you can get rid of all those foods from your home. Simply, if you don't have access to them, it's going to be a lot easier to eat healthy foods. I'm not a great artist, so here you can just see a fridge with different whole foods, meat, fruit, vegetables. You get the point. And so you can do this with various other habits. If you're trying to stop scrolling on social media, you can delete the apps. You can download apps to put restrictions. For example, with YouTube, I have an extension that makes it so there's no suggested videos on the side. So instead of just jumping to another video after this one, there's just none. Imagine if there was none on the side and all you could see was the video. So that's our physical environment. Our social environment also plays a big role because you probably have friends or family that you engage with these habits that you're trying to quit. And so here's a picture of someone having a conversation with a friend. Maybe we can do a different activity. Maybe we can play a sport like spikeball instead of playing video games, just for example. And hopefully your friends or family are willing to help you reach your goals. And if not, if they're upset, if they still want to do those things, maybe you need to find other friends. And that might be hard to hear, but ultimately, if you want to get control of your motivation and habits, that's probably going to have to change. So think about your habit. Think about, what barriers can I put between me and this thing? How can I make it as hard as possible to engage in it so there's almost no choice to? Right, so step number 3, and this also can be sort of a low-hanging fruit, easy to implement if you have the right person, and that's accountability. And so, crazy statistic, we're 95% more likely to achieve our goals if we have the right accountability system. So there are good and less good ways to do this. So if you simply have someone that knows about your goals, that's good if you tell people. But if you have the right system in place where they're following up with you, where you have a scheduled appointment with them, then you're going to be almost guaranteed to reach your goals, especially if you implement all the other steps and strategies that I'm sharing in this video. And I have a way to actually supercharge this that nobody else does with accountability. So first, who can keep you accountable? You could have a friend do it, you could have your partner, someone you live with, family member. You could go on Reddit. There's a specific Reddit community specifically to meet people to become accountability partners. You could also reach out to me. I would love to chat with you and see how I could help you implement these strategies, and you can click the link in the description if you're interested in that. And now, how to actually sort of put this on steroids, it's to combine it with positive reinforcement. So this is basically a fancy way of saying reward yourself for reaching your goals. So for example, if your goal was to not scroll on social media at all, at the end of the day or the week, whatever you decide, you can have a reward for yourself if you stick to that goal. It could be maybe your favorite food, it could be an activity you like to do, a podcast, it's going to depend on you. But rewarding yourself will make you more likely to stick to that goal. You're going to look forward to that. And the reason we're pairing this with accountability is because these people can make sure that you don't reward yourself unless you actually stick to your goal. So for a period of time, for me, my reward was yogurt. At the end of the day, I love to have yogurt with different fruit and nut toppings, and that was just my favorite thing. And I would only allow myself to have that if I reached my goal, and I confirmed that with my wife, who was also the one keeping me accountable. And so by combining these two things, by regularly meeting with your partner, whether that be weekly, daily, you're going to be far more likely to be able to overcome these addictive habits and sort of bring that dopamine back up so that you're motivated to do things that are going to improve your life. Alright, so I mentioned before that when our dopamine is low, while it's going back up, we're going to have these cravings for our old habits again, for that dopamine. We're going to be stressed sometimes, and so how do we deal with those cravings? And so there's a few key things we're going to want to pay attention to. And the first kind of big bucket I like to call mindfulness. And so I split this into 2 different areas. And so proactive mindfulness, these are the things that are kind of going to fill you up. They're going to help process different negative emotions, and they're going to help sort of strengthen you when those cravings come. So these things are meditation, journaling, breath work, exercise, grounding. There are other things, but these are things like you schedule into your day. Whereas reactive mindfulness, these are things that you do when those cravings come, how to deal with those in the moment. And so some ideas for you creating your sort of reactive mindfulness plan: you could try some sort of movement, just getting up, going outside. You could go for a walk, maybe even do some intense exercise if you're feeling stressed. You could remind yourself, I think this is a very good one, and that's shown to help many people. One name for this is playing the tape through to the end. And so that is thinking about what are the consequences if I engage in this habit that I'm craving, what's going to happen? And you can think about the time wasted, who you're going to become, what things you'll never achieve, all the negative effects on your health. And reminding yourself of that and why you created these goals will help you to resist that urge and that temptation. Another one is just simply urge surfing. And that's just sort of being aware that this craving is temporary. It's going to go away. So you're going to feel it and it's going to peak and then it's going to go back down. And so if you can kind of just ride that wave, it's going to go back down. And so if you can be aware of that and just be present and mindful, then you can resist that urge as well. And that's a skill that you'll learn over time. Another idea is to call someone. If you're feeling that urge, maybe your accountability partner, just give them a call. They could help you ride that wave, help you resist. And feel free to add your own ideas to this. Whatever helps you to get through that craving is going to help you as that dopamine is coming back up to where you were before you got into these sort of dopaminergic habits. The other area that's going to really help, because our mind and body are connected, and when we take care of our body, we're not going to feel as stressed, we're not going to feel these cravings as much. And so the three big areas when it comes to taking care of our body are sleep, exercise, and nutrition. So we simply want to be getting enough sleep each night, try to go to bed and wake up at a similar time. That's when our body replenishes dopamine, so that's very important. Exercise, I mentioned that's a part of mindfulness. It's also something that creates dopamine as it creates effort. It's going to deal with that stress in a healthy way as well. And nutrition, kind of similar effects. Nutrition gives us the nutrients to create dopamine. It can negatively affect our dopamine if we're eating junk food, things that are going to spike our dopamine. And it's going to help us to deal with stress if we're getting the right nutrients as well. So if you can implement these things, it's going to help you as you're dealing with those different cravings. This will take some personalization to see what works for you, but once you find the right plan, you're going to be able to get through that sort of fasting period and overcome these cravings. Now that we have these other plans in place, you're ready to actually start this dopamine sort of fast. And you want to choose a method to do this. So there's really only two ways to go about doing this. You can go cold turkey or plan to just not engage in your habit whatsoever. Or you can do what's called weaning, where you progressively reduce the amount that you're engaging in your old habit. These have their pros and cons. So with cold turkey, this is going to allow your brain to sort of reset the fastest. Your dopamine is going to restore to that old high baseline level. However, it can be risky because it's going to be much harder and you might have some cravings that are difficult to resist. With the weaning method, it's going to be slower, but you're going to have a higher chance of succeeding. With all of these tools in mind, if you're able to create a good plan, you have someone to keep you accountable, there's a good chance you could do this. You could be able to get through that 3 weeks, few weeks that it's going to take, where you're not going to feel those cravings as much at the end of it, and you're feeling more motivated to do the things that you're replacing those old habits with. If you decide to go with the weaning method, I want to give you a sort of strategy to get started, which is called the law of dopamine. And this says that because our dopamine is the highest in the morning after we've slept, because while we sleep our dopamine is being restored, we want to make sure to replace our old habits in the morning. Act towards those things that you've decided, okay, I'm going to replace social media with this. Do that thing in the morning, especially when you have that dopamine to use. That's going to make you progressively more and more motivated to do that thing. To summarize, to overcome dopamine addiction, we need to take a break from our dopaminergic activities. The first step is figuring out how to replace those activities with things that take more effort and are less stimulating. Then we want to optimize our social and physical environment to help us reach our goals. We want to ideally have someone who can keep us accountable, something to reward ourselves with, and have them make sure that we're doing that correctly. We want to take care of our body, practice mindfulness, and create a plan of what we'll do when those cravings come so that we don't mess up and get set back. And then lastly, we want to choose a method, either cold turkey or weaning, to help us as we're reaching our goals. I go into these different strategies more in detail in other videos, and so you can subscribe if you're interested in that. Or again, if you're wanting me to help keep you accountable and create a specific plan when it comes to these different things to help you overcome your dopamine addiction, then I'd love to chat with you. Click the link in the description if you want to set up a time for that. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.